I can use GPS to find local repeaters. I can use it to find my location. I can use it to identify other people's location.
ICOM.
Everybody's being quiet. I take it you didn't see that?
The video needs to run.
I did run it. You didn't see it?
There was a black screen in front of it, a gray screen.
Oops. Let me try one more time.
Yeah, the panelists, I mean, the audience is saying they saw a gray screen also.
I can use GPS to find local repeaters. I can use it to find my location. I can use it to identify other people's location.
Yeah.
ICOM.
All right. Thank you for being here today. Good afternoon and welcome to the Hamcation ARRL ARES, a Team Moving Forward webinar. Your panelists for this session are our moderator, Paul Gilbert, who is the ARRL Director of Emergency Management. And joining him, we have Carl Martin, ARRL Section Emergency Coordinator for Northern Florida, and John Wells, the ARRL Section Emergency Coordinator for Southern Florida. Now, a few quick housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen is a Q&A button. Please use that to ask your questions. They will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you have any additional questions, the panelists will be providing you with their email address during this webinar, so you will be able to send those on to them. The webinar is also being live streamed on YouTube. It's being recorded for later viewing, and you can find the information to access these videos at www.hamcation.com. Since this webinar is going to end at 3:54 sharp and the microphones have been muted, we're ready to begin. So Paul, please take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. My name is Paul Gilbert, Kilo Echo 5 Zulu Whiskey, and I am the Director of Emergency Management for the American Radio Relay League. And today we have Carl Martin and John Wells, who are, let me bring my opening screen up here. I need to share my screen. And then I can bring my opening screen up and I can start my, there we go. Carl Martin, K4HBN, the ARRL Emergency Coordinator, Section Emergency Coordinator of Northern Florida, and John Wells, W4CMH, the ARRL Section Emergency Coordinator for Southern Florida. The name of their presentation today is ARES, a Team Moving Forward. Following their presentation, I'll have a few comments and then we'll take questions and answers. Let's go ahead and get started. We have about 45 to 50 minutes, and I know that Carl and John have a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to unshare my screen. And Carl, I believe you have your presentation. If you would share your screen, and y'all can get started.
Okay, thank you. We gotta find how to share here.
Down at the bottom, there's a.
Yeah, I just gotta start the presentation here.
Mm-hmm.
There, you should be seeing the screen now.
Yes, it is there. Good to go.
Okay, thank you. Want to thank Hamcation for having us. I know they did a lot of work to try to get this up and running. And I want to thank John for being able to make it. Ben, which is the Ben Henley, the SEC for West Central Florida, wanted to be here, but he was not able to make it. Trying to find my notes here. What did I do with them? There they are. But again, I wanted to thank everybody for having us, and Paul also. Thank you for inviting us. Hopefully, we make it entertaining for everybody. But I'm Carl Martin, K4HBN. Like Paul said, the section emergency coordinator for Northern Florida. Over to the next slide here. This is what both the topics we'll be covering. Where is it? Oh, no, I pasted past it. There we go. I've been an ARES member since 2001 when I got my license. I joined immediately. I became this assistant emergency coordinator for Volusia County here in Florida in 2006 all the way to 2013. Emergency coordinator for the county from 2013 to 2018, and then Kevin, the new section manager at the time, asked me to be the section emergency coordinator, and that was at 2018. Just to remind people of Michael, that was just a month to 2 months before Michael, so it was quite an introduction to the position. I'll hand it over to John, so you can take it over.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to attend our webinar today and talk about ARES. And I appreciate the Hamcation folks helping us out as well. I'm currently the section emergency coordinator for the Southern Florida section. I have been since 2018 when I was appointed. I previously had been the district emergency coordinator and an assistant emergency coordinator at the county level. I'm also a section and local public information officer, I've been for ARES and amateur radio itself. And my background really is I was a first responder. I'm actually retired law enforcement. And before that, I was in the Air Force as a crypto analyst. So I've been around radios like my whole life, it seems like. So again, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And hopefully we can make this very informational and informative for you. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, well, I passed by the topics here, but this will be the topics we'll be covering. What's a volunteer, serving your group, or the groups you're serving, I should say. But basically, we're going to be covering everything involving agencies and entities, not just working with an emergency management agency or working with Red Cross. It's working with all kinds of community-based non-governmental agencies or governmental agency. It's just working with the agency that you're going to be working with. That can be different in all kinds of different cases. I go to the next slide here. What is a volunteer? John, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I'll take this. All right. So one of the reasons I put a volunteer up here, I put the definition as a person who freely offers to take part in an enterprise or undertake a task. In other words, it's somebody who's usually doing because they have some compassion or a passion for something that they're doing. And I would say that most, if not all, the ARES members I've run into definitely meet this category or this definition. And as volunteers, we agree to work for whatever group or entity that we serve, right? We were talking earlier, Carl kind of alluded to it, we're not trying to say that you only work for one entity. Many times we wear multiple hats depending on what's going on in our community. And then ultimately, really, being a volunteer does not mean that you're really in charge of the operation unless you're delegated that authority. More times than not, we're participants fulfilling a function and not much beyond that. And that's kind of a good thing because then we're able to hone our skills to just handle our one function instead of trying to run the entire operation. For those of you that have run large operations, you know what I'm talking about. You can go to the next slide there, Carl. Do you want me to take it, Carl, or you want to run with it? What do you want to do?
Yeah, we can just go back and forth.
Okay, you want to take this slide then?
Well, no, yeah, we can work on it together.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I'll start off then. One of the things that you definitely want to do is you want to be able to identify the group that you're going to be supporting, no matter who they are. You want to know who they are and what their function is, so that you understand who you're going to serve. Many times it seems when I talk to local ECs and folks like that, sometimes they're just not 100% sure of who they're going to work with. So unfortunately, this takes a lot of foot work by not only the emergency coordinator in that community, but also the members, so that they understand kind of who they're going to be working with. And many times, you know, we work with emergency management, particularly here in Florida. We spend a lot of time working with emergency management, CERT groups too, for those that have community groups, the Red Cross, of course, homeowners associations. You may have a huge community where you're just providing communications to them. Obviously, the Red Cross, and also charities or religious groups, hospitals, we got, you name it. So we're not trying to say that any one group's better than another, but knowing your group and you know who you're actually going to be reporting to is really a good function to go with. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's here in Volusia, we work for emergency management, but there's other in the Northern Florida section that they volunteer specifically for hospitals or, like you said, religious groups. It all depends on the served agency. Each one needs are different. You know, the Red Cross needs aren't going to be the same thing as emergency management. The Red Cross has been handling message traffic a lot, especially recently in the last few years. And emergency management is not going to be handling that. They're going to be handling their own personal priorities, and maybe not even using message traffic. They may be needing to use tactical directly. Go to the next slide here. The mission served agency entities.
You want to pick this up? All right.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've done now that you've identified who you're going to actually serve, or the potential folks you're going to serve, obviously, you have to understand what their true mission is. And this takes some time, right? You have to spend a little time with the folks to understand it, because there's nothing worse than being called up. And you can't always avoid this, but if you can, you want to have a plan and know who you're going to be working with. And a lot of times it's tough to get in the doors of some of these groups until they absolutely need you, like when the fire's really burning, then they want you, versus, you know, ahead of time. But you want to make sure that you can do planning. And when you're talking to them, you want to know what it is that they want you to do. In other words, what are there going to be their communication needs? What are their what they anticipate those, and how do they anticipate that they're going to need you, and in what circumstances? And that allows you now to work with your group to understand what you can provide, and how you're going to mesh with that group. In other words, how you're going to integrate with their needs and your capabilities. And I think one of the things you have to be able to say is, you know, right now, I don't know exactly how we're going to work with you 100%, but we're going to come back to you once I get to with my members, and we're going to see where we are. Because it's okay to say that you just don't know at the time. Many times I think we over volunteer, and that can lead us into some trouble. So hopefully those of you that are out there doing this kind of can step back for a second and say, okay, let me go talk to my folks. Let's see where we're at. And I want to meet again in a week or 2 weeks or something like that. Carl, you want to pick up?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. A lot of places, a lot of counties I work with here in Northern Florida, they try to help out with Red Cross, and then they also try to work with the counties and work with this and that. And as everybody knows, we can't work with multiple agencies with the people we have. You know, some counties here and locally only have 10, 15 people, and you can't work with two or three different agencies with that many people. So you have to be honest with yourself and with the agency, letting them know what your resources have, what you have to be able to offer them, so they can actually work with you. They're not going to just ignore you or just say, oh, well, it's only a few people, I don't need them. They're going to talk to you and work with you and try to find out where that you can fit. The capabilities.
All right, I guess I'll start off here.
Yeah.
One of the things you got to do now that you've spoken with these agencies and you have an understanding of what they want from you, and perhaps already in your mind you have some ideas of what you want to do, you can go back and talk with your folks as well as evaluate for yourself. You know, what capabilities do you have? And one of the ways to do that is understanding each member's capability. I may be able to do a certain function, and maybe Carl can do another function that's better than I can. Maybe he has more skill set or he has better equipment. There could be lots of things going on. And understanding how to match those people up with the current mission, whatever that mission might be for that agency, is really going to be helpful and ensure that you have a successful interaction with them. In other words, you want to assess successful outcome. You want them to be happy with our response as well, and your response, as well as you be happy with how you integrated with them. Now, there's always going to be room for improvement, but that's one of the things you really need to start thinking of ahead of time. And you really just can't think of this in your mind. I mean, it's where you start, but you got to make sure that what you are thinking about can be applied across your members. Carl?
Yeah, you got to go, like I said, you got to consider the capabilities, and that's not just equipment, but it's also the personnel. What do they know? Their skill sets. One may be more of an expert in a digital mode, or be able to do better on voice. One could have equipment with amp and high antennas. It's good to know what the capabilities of each person is in your group, so you can adapt to what the changing needs will be. And that's what I was just going to say. Changing needs. Go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead and take it. Go ahead.
No, I was just pointing out that
okay.
That was the next slide.
All right. So again, one of the things to remember is that you got to be a little bit flexible. And of course, in this time of the pandemic, obviously, we've really had to start to learn how to be flexible just in our personal lives, let alone in these activations or events or incidents that we get called up for. But it's important to be flexible and to be able to change assignments as the change from an entity comes. So if all of a sudden you have worked it out that this is what you're going to provide to this particular entity or agency, and then all of a sudden that changes, well, then you just need to start to revisit that and then reevaluate your group's capability. I think so many times, particularly myself, I was in law enforcement for a couple decades plus, and it seemed like once you wrote a policy, you never ever went back to it. You were basically high-fiving because you've got it all done, and you don't ever think it's going to change. I've got it done. Let's move on to the next big project on my desk. And unfortunately, in this environment that we're in, we're always having changes occurring, not only within an agency or within an entity, but also in their communication capabilities. Let's face it, amateur radio capabilities have changed dramatically over even the last decade. Well, imagine how much it's changed also in the public sector as well. Carl?
Yeah, and it's also, don't forget about the MOUs as well. You've got agreements with different agencies and MOUs. They're going to need to be updated as time goes along. We just, here in Northern Florida, just went through a whole bunch of document changes because of Michael. And the three sections wanting to work closer together, we put in standards. And we finished that, I think about a year and a half ago, and we're already starting to roll in back again to see what we can change, what we can update, what needs to be updated. It's a living document, so it always needs to be looked at every few years at least, and take input from the people and other groups and agencies and try to work it out so it works out for everybody's benefit. Training and preparation.
All right. So one of the things that we've seen a major evolution in is formal training. And if you think about it, all groups, no matter if they're volunteers or professionals or whatever, always usually have some kind of training. Particularly even where I live now in the county that I'm in, they actually train people to work at the pods, right? The points of distribution. They train them to work in the shelters. So even though they're volunteers, they still have to go through certain training, certain background checks and things like that. So many served agencies require this. This has been, of course, the bane of us SECs and ECs of recent times, right? The ARRL has, and many states, and that for that matter, have adopted more training, more formalized training as well. And this has been a major hurdle for us because so many volunteers, I believe, or at least it seems in their mind, they think, well, I volunteer, and then when something happens, I'll just go. And they don't realize that, because we're trying to integrate into a professional system in many cases, not always, right? Some entities like your local community may not be that way, like your HOA, but many times emergency management now is going to require additional training. The training, though, has a twofold purpose, right? One is to meet a minimum requirement, for example, but the other is to ensure that that person has an understanding of what they're going to do. And one of the ways that we track the training is a task book, right? Task books are recognized federally, and at many emergency management groups, they understand what a task book is. The other thing nice about having a task book is your members always carrying it with them. So if somebody has to look real quick at their training or whatever, they always have it with them. It's quick. The task book isn't necessarily great for the SEC and the EC, though, because if it's emergency comes up, you don't have time to flip through everybody's task book. What a pain that would be, right? But if you could have a database that has the basics of of each member's capabilities, you could quickly go down the database and see that, oh yeah, John here's not a good candidate for this mission that we're getting assigned right now, but Carl will be fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So you need to come up with a way that you can track your own personnel in a way that you understand, right? Because you're the one that's going to be perhaps deploying the folks or getting calls on who can we send. Carl, I'll let you pick up with C.
I had to take a look at what that C was.
Yeah, this is one
Yeah.
you talk about a lot, so
Yeah.
I was going to let you take this one.
No, thank you. No, I completely agree with what John says on this. And a lot of people always like to point out that in the past, having a radio or the enthusiasm to volunteer was always what amateur radio needed to be able to help out and get things done. That has changed a lot in the last, like I said, John said, in the last 10, 15 years, especially between government agencies. It's not what you really can offer as for equipment, but it's skills, professionalism. You have to know how to communicate with the professionals and be professional. And I keep telling people that we're not just amateur radio operators, we are communicators. It's not okay just to have amateur radio. Of course, that's going to be your main way of getting information through during an emergency, because a lot of the landlines and things like that will be down. But it's also, you got to have knowledge of the equipment that they use, the 900 megahertz systems, the Red Cross radios, know how to use a phone is also important, because the main goal is to get the message to its destination. That is the whole reason we're here. In a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, we're here to get a message to point A to point B. And trying to send it only through amateur radio can delay that message. And that message can be very important. It may not be important to us, but it may be important to the person that needs to get it. And if it's faster to pick up a phone because the phone is working, then use the phone. If it's faster to fax it, fax it. Whatever is the quickest way. If it ends up being amateur radio, then use amateur radio. But if you have other ways, don't ignore them, because it's not amateur radio. Go ahead, John. You want to add to that?
You can go next slide then.
Okay.
Yeah, you got that. Good. Thanks. So the next thing we're talking about now is, preparing our team. You've already talked to the entity that you're going to be working with, or entities. You know what their requirements are. You know what your own group capabilities are. Now it's time to practice some of this stuff so that the folks that go out will have some really concrete practice underneath their belt. Because there's, what they say, training is one of those things where, some people find it very boring and everything else, but when you train enough, everything kind of comes natural to you. And one of the things that, that we always highly encourage, I know Carl and I and Ben, and now of course I'm speaking of Florida now because us section emergency coordinators talk all the time, and I'm sure it's the same in all the other states. Plus we have reflectors and stuff that we talk to each other on as well throughout the country. Conducting regular relevant exercises. Don't do an exercise just because. You want to do an exercise that's going to be relevant to the mission that you potentially could be exposed to. And drills need to be the same way, as well as activities, because when you're well trained, you end up having an engaged cadre of members. And what I mean by an engaged cadre is not only are they volunteering and raising their hand, but they understand what's going on. They're trained to that level, and you know that you have confidence in them, and they have confidence in themselves. Because those of you that have never had to go into complete chaos, for example, it helps to know know your side of the story, at least, so that at least the other chaos doesn't become more chaotic, right? If you're chaotic on your radio operation and then you're also chaotic because of the situation, that becomes a problem. And again, I said again, activities should be relevant to the performance of the mission. Again, you're trying to make the members be more confident in themselves, and your confidence level in them will increase too, which is very important. Everyone needs to feel confident. I would also highly encourage you, if you can, to train with the actual group you're going to be with. It'd be nice to have a few names and faces hooked up. I know they change, but at least if you have done it before, it really does help. I still remember my first hurricane deployment, and I got to be honest with you. Fortunately, I had a lot of first responder years, but I'd never met any of these people, but maybe one just by accident the week or two before the storm. It was just an accident that I had met them. So not really having a full understanding of what was going to be required and things like that kind of left you in limbo a little bit. Fortunately, I was able to adapt, and other people were able to adapt just fine. But these are things that we want to think about to give our people a chance to be successful, and training is part of that, especially real life training. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, another thing that connects to the previous slide is trying to get more integrated with your served agency. Like this for local county here, not Volusia, but there's a local county in northern Florida that to get more interaction with their served agency, they volunteered to answer phones or help out with organizing their equipment, things like that. So the people's actually in there with working side by side with others, and emergency management or the leader will see you there, and they'll next time when the agency's activated, they'll think, what about these amateur radio operators? When the activation happens and you're not around before then it doesn't come up within their mind, because they're working with other people. Working with the people that's what reminds them that you are there, is that you're actually there, not just for the emergency, but for regular day-to-day things. And if they can't volunteer in other ways, just go in and talk to them once a week, twice a week, and just be one-on-one. But talk to them. That's really what's important. And also, one other thing I want to point out on the number of people. I see a lot of ECs talk about, well, we only have 2 or 3 people, but then they don't do any kind of training or activations. I've seen the counties that only have 2 or 3 people, and then they start having doing training or just simple events, parades, things like that, once a month, once every few weeks. And that kind of activity really does build and bring in the people. Like I said, I've seen them go from 2 to 3 people up to 50 or 60 within a year or two. So it's having that activity is what brings the people in. There you go.
Okay. So one of the other things that I'll piggyback off Carl there is also some groups have kind of made some of the activities, not just radio, right? They've made them social events. Maybe they have a cookout or something like that, or maybe they do a demonstration and have like a picnic with the families or something. And some groups have done real well with that. It may not work for every group. It may not work in every location, but that's something to consider if that seems to, again, bring in more involvement with everybody. So one of the other things you got to do is you got to learn to adapt your training opportunities, and as well as adapting it, of course, you want to train the way that you're going to deploy. You know, I talk to ECs pretty frequently, and one of the things that I kind of see is, and not only in my section but elsewhere when I talk to them, is I always kind of ask, how do you deploy your people? Well, I call them up. Well, do you ever practice that? Do you know that that's going to work? Do you, you know, if you use a calling tree, do you know that that's going to work? You know, a phone tree, the old school phone trees or whatever. Do you know that's going to work? Or do you use a county-wide alert system? So be thinking of how you're going to get your people together. Also, right now, of course, the pandemic has caused a lot of issues, and people seem to feel like we can't train because of pandemics on. That's not true. There's a lot of options out there. You just got to kind of, I guess, use our noggins a little bit, and that is consider using different training deployment options. You know, not, you know, a lot of us think we want to be in person. We want to be with our friends and our fellow operators, and that. There's a lot to be said for that, and sure. But there's nothing wrong with just training on the radio, you know, doing a quick call up. Hey, say I want to do a quick net check-in, 10, 15 minutes, everybody checks in, boom. Okay, I know I got 20 people that were able to check in within a matter of 15 minutes, you know, just to know kind of where your capabilities are, maybe doing it at different times of the day because people work or they're out of town or whatever. Doing virtual things. Of course, we do a lot of virtual stuff like we're doing today. Simulated deployments. So let's say, for instance, that you go out to hospitals or shelters, or you go to certain places. Well, you're not going to be in person most times then because you're going one place and I'm going somewhere else. Have them simulate deploying and practicing. Portable system practice. You know, I do this at least once a month, even if I do it in my backyard. I set up my systems, make sure it works, first of all. Number two, I want to make sure I'm competent and capable of operating my system. And by the way, it's going to work the way I said. I have had many circumstances where I have ended up on events, for example, and one of my amateur radio buddies that I really like will show up, and they have this really cool looking Go box, and it has all the bells and whistles in it, but half the stuff doesn't work. Yeah, I've been meaning to fix that. So make sure your stuff works, because you don't want to have to be fixing it before you go out or at the last minute or whatever. And you want to know that you're going to be confident. Again, when things are chaotic, you having confidence in your operating skills and what your radio equipment's going to do will really help you in the long run. I can testify to that in real life too. The other thing is many training opportunities require a virtual presence, right? Especially now, but even if you live in a big area, like for example, Carl has 44 counties in his section. So it's a tough deal if he wanted to train with all of his counties at one time. So virtual is about the only way to go. You know, you're not going to get everybody to drive 6 hours to meet in one location. So it's just not going to happen. And, you know, we have training online like FEMA classes. The ARRL does classes that way, you know, online as well. You can use Zoom like we're doing today, or other platforms similar to Zoom for virtual training. And remember, don't forget that, you know, Zoom and the other formats and do have the capability to break out into groups. And there's nothing that says you can't break out into a group and then have that group. Maybe you geographically coordinate them so that they're close enough. Maybe part of the function is to go out on the radio on simplex and do some kind of activity. So be thinking a little bit, 90s term was out of the box, but be thinking that way, just how you could maybe integrate today's technology and then using practice, especially given the circumstances of today. Carl, would you like to pick up?
Yeah, the breakout rooms are a great idea. I talked to John about that because I didn't know much about them, but the breakout rooms can really benefit the whole group. But there's one thing also that I want to bring up. Our local EC, he did a really interesting setup. Because of COVID, you can't go to face to face and actually have these deployments. After the net, which is on Sunday, he asked people to deploy to their nearest gas station and see how they communicate. That was able to test the repeater. He could test a simplex at the same time. We had a person that did that found out that they couldn't talk at that gas station, that there's a building in the way and they're not able to talk in that area. So you can, over time, you can find out how your repeater's doing, how your systems are doing, and know ahead of time of how your geographical locations will be. And final thoughts.
All right, I'll start this off. First of all, like I said kind of earlier, I alluded to this. We need to have some flexibility and understanding of our served groups, and understand that they're also feeling some of the same things that we're feeling right now. Some of the pressures and stresses. Not only are our members having it, right, and their volunteers and our volunteers are having it, but also, having that flexibility is vital to attracting and retaining, active qualified members, right? We want our members to be active, not only, active, but qualified. And so, it makes it a tough go for all of us in that fact. We've all seen our numbers drop considerably. I would argue that some that have dropped were probably not as active as they could be, but we've certainly lost some active ones. And of course, we lose some through attrition as we all age together. We do lose some as we start to get to certain ages and have certain medical difficulties that make it so maybe we can't deploy because unfortunately I'm on, some kind of other medical treatment that I can't get away from home or whatever, or it puts me more in harm's way than I should be. So again, thinking about attracting and retaining these qualified members is really a good idea. There's a lot of ways to do it, but every community is a little different. And remember, every group's different. You got to hopefully be serving agencies or entities that people would be excited about working with or volunteering for. And that can be tough. There's no doubt about it. I will leave you with this quote because I know we want to have some time for Q&A. I often use this quote, and because of all my years of unplanned incidents and stuff, and I always use this, and I use it in the schools as well. And I say, adapt and overcome. That really should be kind of our motto, in my opinion. As we get there on the scene, we have an idea in our mind what we're going to be doing, but by golly, everything just went south. Just adapt and overcome. Use your noggin. Amateurs, we always are really, really innovative. We have a lot of skill sets and a lot of knowledge, so we can usually overcome most things, unless it's just beyond everything. But we're pretty good at it. Carl, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, and you're saying adapt and overcome is great. I think it's wonderful because I see a lot of ECs or some ECs that they do the planning and then they expect it to go exactly that way. And if anything changes, they're blown. They don't know what to do. They have no idea what to do next. Being able to adapt as that comes in is very important. And you got to be able to overcome, like you said on there. And on me, I actually found this quote when I was younger. Just became part of the ARES group. We were at the fire training center that we have here locally, and they had this quote on the plaque: "Don't train until you get it right, but train until you can't get it wrong." And that has stuck into my mind for so long, because training is very important. If you don't have that, if it's not second nature, then you're going to stop and think and not be able to, overcome, as John says. And that's our information. Be able to reach us if you have any other further questions or ideas or whatever.
So we'll turn it back to you, Paul, to take over as moderator. Did you want to go through the questions and have us field them? How do you want to do that?
What I was going to do was I've been seeing some couple questions about, where do I find information on ARES? So if I can, Carl, if you can unshare your screen and let me have it, I have pulled up, or I will pull up, that is. Let me knock this down. I will go through here right quick. And you can find on the ARRL.org website, if you're looking for information on ARES, it's right here under the Public Service tab. Just click on that and it'll come over here in the left-hand column. You'll see ARES, ARES. You also have public service resources, honor roll, served agencies and partners, NTS, HAM-aid. There's quite a few different ones come underneath here. But in this particular case, we're interested in ARES. So click on ARES, and it comes over here to Amateur Radio Emergency Service. And you've got the ARES manual, the resource guide. Here's a fillable PDF of the task book. Here's a Word version of the task book that goes along with the 2 classes. You can see here quite a few other things. And then somebody asked about the training classes. A couple of the ARRL training classes, they're under this licensing, education, and training. I'm probably going a little fast, but we're kind of getting short on time here. And licensing, education, and training, and courses and training right here. ARRL continuing education program, emergency communications training, and online courses, emergency communication training, MCOM training, intro to MCOM online. There's quite a few titles there that y'all can look through. Online course catalog, learn more. And here's the 3 classes that ARRL offers: Introduction to Emergency Communications, Public Service and Emergency Communications Management for Radio Amateurs. That's not just for people that want to be managers, but it's highly recommended for people that do want to be managers. And then here's the PR 101, Public Relations 101 for radio amateurs.
Hey, Paul, can I make a comment about what you're doing right now?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, great. I want to remind everybody that to be an ARES member, you do not have to be an ARRL member, even though we would love for you to be one. You don't have to be one. So don't let the fact, let that be a deterrent for members in the future. And hopefully, once they see what we're doing and how we're doing it, hopefully that will excite them to maybe join the ARRL and some of the other facets that they would have access to by being members. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Absolutely. And also I had one person over in the chat box ask if you have to have any training before becoming an ARES member. And the answer to that is no. It's highly recommended that once you become an ARES member, you do take the FEMA classes, you do take like the Introduction to Emergency Communications, and you could take them before, but do you have to have the training in order to become an ARES member? No, absolutely not. Just come on. You come with a good attitude and a desire to learn and move forward. And let's see what else.
There's a lot of questions I noticed asking about the traffic system.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say on here, it might answer some of the questions, is that we still use National Traffic System in
Okay.
ARES. We may use the ICS 213 instead, but I suggest having the NTS form and 213 in front of you so they can easily tell you I'm using NTS, and then you can easily transcribe the message, because we do have to have trackable messages during a disaster. Not all of them can be tactical.
Okay, let's look at some of the, we've got a few minutes left here that we can do some of the questions. And there was a real good one I saw here. So let me scroll down through this. And it was about ARES Connect. What's going to be replacing ARES Connect? And as I spoke earlier in the members forum, our emergency management interim committee has formed a working group. It's a small working group right now, but we have started a working group that is going to be taking information from the field and also adding people to that working group. So if anybody's got like a short list of 4 or 5 bullet points that they want to see in the next ARES Connect, which it's not going to be called ARES Connect. We don't know what it's going to be called yet. If you want to, you can email those to me, and we will certainly put them on, put them in the queue. And if y'all got any comments while I'm looking down through here, you're more than welcome.
Well, I'll comment. I saw one it says, will the task book be updated? One of the interesting things is I think some people are under misnomer, and Paul, you can correct me. The ARRL put the task book on their website in order to give an example of a task book. So for example, here in Florida, we went ahead and used examples from the task book and then honed it to our environment. And also our emergency management for the state gave input as well. So we were able to do that. So that's why he says it's available not only in PDF, but in Word doc, so that you can modify it to what you need. Like, for example, you may not want your members to know how to solder a PL259 specifically. Maybe you just want them to put a PL259 on, because you might be fine. All I got's a crimper and if all I got's the crimp model, maybe I don't even have a soldering iron with me. I mean, it's hard to say. You may want to make it more specific to your situation and also what your local agency is requiring. I know here in Florida, one county is requiring a couple specialized ICS classes that are not even mentioned on the task book. They're very specialized and they're requiring it. So that could be added in. And so again, use it as more of a guide template and then make it your own for your particular situation.
Okay. I have one question here about, are the classes that I mentioned earlier free? Yes, they are. They are free. There's no charge for those. They used to charge, but they've got things moved around to where they are free. Is there a time frame for the ARES Connect replacement? We hope to have some type of prototype by the end of the year, if not sooner. Until then, once ARES Connect does sunset, we will be using the traditional, I had a hard time saying that word, traditional Form 4, Form 2 method of reporting to headquarters. Let's see, here's a good one. What are the safety aspects of transmitting near a gasoline station? I would say I wouldn't do it, especially if you're at the pump and you're filling up. I would not be, in fact, they say don't even use your cell phone. So that's kind of a safety issue. That's a good question, actually. Let's see. There were a couple of things here about some Florida-centric questions, if somebody wants to answer that.
Can I answer? I see another one that's not Florida centric. Can I answer that one first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, it's in the chat box here. It says, do you have any suggestions on how to prioritize demands on a county-wide ARES group? It says our group serves county emergency management, but also subgroups serve the local metro-wide hospital group. So again, this county sounds like they're doing a bunch of things. And how should the EC handle the individual priorities, metro, hospital versus county emergency management? Well, it depends on how your county is really set up. If your hospitals were to fall under emergency management, then you could go through emergency management and they would help explain where to deploy to. If they're totally separate entities, I don't know why they would, but they could be totally separate entities, then you're almost going to have to make a choice as to who's going to be your primary served agency, and then do you have enough people to serve another one? That's going to be really a call on your part because you're there on the ground. Did you have anything to add to that, Carl? What do you think about that?
I wasn't listening to you there for a second because I was reading the questions. Go ahead.
How about Paul then? How about you? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I thought you summed it up pretty well.
Okay.
Okay, got one here. Let me get back down to it. It says, in agreement with the idea that we're communicators there to help the agency and there to use the best means to get the job done. However, there seems to be more of a push to use government provided systems or a local public safety system in lieu of amateur radio. Are we walking away from amateur radio, putting the spectrum at risk and further eroding the use of amateur radio? Well, that's a two-sided sword. The biggest reason that people are not using amateur radio in traditional means, and when I say traditional means, that's having an amateur radio operator operating a radio, shadowing a police officer or fire truck or something like that, is because the local public safety, the local public service and public safety systems are not failing like they used to, and neither are the commercial cell phone systems. The vendors and the public safety people have spent a lot of time and money in hardening their systems, and they just aren't failing like they used to, except unless we have a catastrophic event like Puerto Rico or like like Hurricane Andrew that the Florida guys I can't think of the right word right now, but like what the Florida folks in Hurricane Andrew endured back a few years ago. So you have to be versatile on how you want to do your communications. You know, you're communicating, maybe operating one of those public safety radios. You're communicating, maybe just answering the phone. It may be vetting ICS 213s. That's why it's important to have the training. And also not only just the ARRL training, but the OXCOM training. OXCOM is a DHS IC certification that if you can get in a class. The problem is that there's nobody's presenting classes right now. They're fixing to start a virtual OXCOM class, but it hasn't started yet, and it's going to be 5 days long. So that you need to work with your public safety agencies or your served agencies and find ways that, other than just talking on a radio, that you can help them out, and that way you will show them that you're flexible and still an asset.
Hey, Paul, I see a few more comments coming in. I'm going to go down this
Go ahead.
rabbit hole. I wasn't going to.
Go ahead.
A lot of you are still commenting about the gas station issue. The answer is you are 100% correct. I'm actually a certified fire and explosion investigator. I was trying to stay away from that rabbit hole there. All of those gas station related cell phone and sparking and all that, those are all debunked myths. All of them are.
Okay.
And again, though, you still want to be safe around ignitable liquids. You know, you don't want to create any sparks or those kind of things. Your radio should not do that, but potentially other things could. So you just want to be safe. That's all.
Okay, that's appreciated. Here's one. Is there an effort to bring the ICS classes that are required in person to members across the country? The ICS classes that are required are all online. Just Google IC 100 or IC 200, and it'll take you to the FEMA website. You can sign up and take the class in the comfort of your own home. That way you don't have to go out and do it in a classroom setting. We have 251.
Hey, Paul, can I make one more? Paul, can I make
Sure.
one more comment about that? What you just said? Just to let you guys know, down here, and if you take a look at the Southern Florida section website, I actually made what I called some training bulletins, and they explain to you how to get your student number for FEMA classes and how to enroll in each one. And they actually are PDFs on that site, and they tell you kind of step by step how to go through them. That might be helpful to someone who's not done any FEMA classes yet.
Okay, that's excellent information. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again one last time and put up the closing slide. And I appreciate everybody submitting all of the questions.
Yeah, let me add that if we didn't get to your question, please contact us. We'll be glad to answer the question or even discuss it with you. That's the information is online or on the slides here on how to get a hold of us.
Yes, anybody that's got any questions, I just put up the closing slide, and you can see my email address, and you can send us a question. You can send Carl and John a question, or you can send me a question, and I'll do my best to get it to them and see if we can get it answered. And again, I appreciate everybody being here, and back to the moderator.
All right, well, I want to really thank you all, Paul, Carl, and John. This was a great, very informative presentation. Just a reminder to everyone that you can get back on YouTube to get this information, to view this again, and to get the email addresses for our panelists today. You'll just need to go to www.hamcation.com where you can find that information. So thank you again for your participation. Great service. This is a great thing that we would want to be engaged in for our community. And have a great day, and hope to see you all next year or earlier.
Thank you all. And thank